North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for joining us. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias, and we point out both. We also make commentary, which is not the news. Everything that I say from an opinion standpoint is simply that, my opinion. Just as valuable as yours, and so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate every day, Monday through Friday, from 2 until 5 live, and then anytime you want on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Patreon. It's good to have you here. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. It's Friday. It's Friday. Has this week been long enough for you? I'm just wondering. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, look, John David's dressed as Casual Friday. Yes, indeed. But we noticed yesterday you were wearing a polo shirt instead of a tie and a shirt. 2 reasons. Reason number 1, my washing machine is broken. So I have been doing something that I haven't done for decades. And I've been enjoying the abject thrill of doing laundry at a laundromat. The reason that I have a broken washing machine is because I have an LG washing machine. It's fantastic. It's the best washing machine I ever had, but it's about 8-9 years old, and it broke. And now what we're trying to do is get parts. Trying to get parts has been a challenge. We've been waiting a couple of months for these parts. Actually, we've got it down to one part. And it's the manufacturer has gone, just extending how much longer it's going to take to get this part for several weeks now. And I'm hoping that at someday this part's going to show up. But meanwhile, I ran out of shirts. So I wore a polo yesterday. And I have laundry to do this weekend, along with a whole bunch of other honeydews that I can hardly wait to get into. Anyway, so the circumstance goes like this. Circumstance goes, okay. I wore a polo yesterday. I hope nobody said anything. My executive producer thought it was great. Dirk Steele said, John, when you wear those jackets and ties and shirts, it makes you look old. Yeah, the kids of today just don't dress like that. I got it. And so I he was the only person. Well, nobody else did either. But he was somebody who said, "Yeah, that was a good look." Okay, well, here I am in another polo because I ran out of shirts. The other reason is this: in order for me to find a shirt that fits, I have 36-inch long arms. 36-inch long arms. And I have a stiff-necked thistlehead 18.5-inch neck. Okay? In order to find a shirt that fits, I got to buy a shirt that literally goes down to my knees. I mean, almost to my knees. Certainly halfway between my hips and my knees. And I've got all this material, and I just don't, I look like I'm wearing an inverted bell. And yeah. Yvonne says, it's not that the shirts and ties make you look old. It just doesn't make you look as approachable. Excuse me? Me? Not approachable? My God, that's ridiculous. I'm kidding. So I get it. I'm just trying to be a little more professional because, I just want to be professional. I want to dress to the level of the broadcast, and I have high regard for the broadcast, maybe too high. But that being said, I just thought I'd give it a try, and everybody went, okay, whatever. So between, and I hate, this is going to sound so imperious. I hate shirts that don't fit. I'm really picky about my shirts. And And I hate shirts that don't fit, and custom ones are available, but expensive. You know what I mean? So what I have to do is I have to yeah, I got to get my washing machine fixed, and I got to get shirts that fit. So wish me luck. This is Friday, as I said, casual Friday. So I hope you're wearing your polo, and of course, appropriate underwear, pants, shoes. I hope you're wearing all of that stuff, even though there are times when the bohemian aspect of myself says, well, nah, never mind. So let's get to the news. Let's get to doing what we do. But I just thought I'd give you that little human anecdote. Do you know how much of a pain in the gigantic tuchus it is to go to a laundromat and do your laundry? Anyway, the President of the United States is someone who suffers the dichotomy of a three-way dichotomy of him being his own man, two, being put in a position that he's really not equipped for, and three, having his policy and his policy statements run by somebody else. That's just an assessment of mine. It's my opinion. And so what happens is that the intersection of these three problems continues to be a very difficult nut to crack for the people running Joe Biden. And Joe, when he's himself, makes ill-advised statements. He made one the other day. He has been dealing with this thing that's overblown as a, quote, scandal, unquote, when the actual scandal has nothing to do with the classified documents that former high government officials have in their possession. The actual scandal is the hypocrisy between one particular high government official and the way he was treated versus another high government official of a different party and the way he's being treated. That is the scandal. But the same media that participates in that hypocrisy scandal refuses to report it as something they're complicit in. And so what ends up happening is that the coalition of these two things, creates this infuriating mess. And the latest one that came out having to do with the classified documents is something that he tossed off the cuff while he was being himself. And that was a situation where he was referring to the way these documents came to life, or came to light rather, and the way he has handled it. This was published earlier today from Fox News. President Joe Biden has something he wants the public to know. After the discovery of highly classified material in President Biden's former office, his garage and library, the president wanted to make one thing and only one thing perfectly clear, quote, "I have no regrets," unquote. Oh. The Biden administration, the people that are actually running Joe Biden, they have an endless supply of anti-migraine pills. And man, they are going through them every possible second. This was something that was foretold by President Obama. President Obama said, never underestimate the ability for Joe Biden to F things up. Now, in the grand scheme of things, he's effed up plenty of very, very serious things. But this one, on the scale of reality, is, while important, not as important as some of the other F-ups that he's famous for. And I've made that clear. Hang on a second here. Oh, okay. So anyway, so he said, "I have no regrets." According to the article of Fox News, it was a moment that rivaled disastrous observations, such as while classified material was found in his garage, it was a locked garage that also housed his beloved 1967 Corvette. While President Biden's Corvette standard for storing classified documents was baffling, his declaration of no regrets is downright infuriating. And once again, this is according to an opinion by Jonathan Turley. And I understand why he's saying that. I truly do. I have no regrets. When President Trump was in office, when he would make statements of, let's say, personal policy, he was described as being imperious. Someone is just he's a dictator. He's no better than Hitler. All of these things got thrown out to President Trump because he would say something of a positive nature, or something that he believed, and something that as president he felt was a policy that should at least be considered, if not executed immediately. And he was called all manner of horrifyingly totalitarian terms that really had no basis in reality, but because the mainstream media is so anti-Trump that they've completely destroyed themselves as a credible source of information. We still have a situation here where hypocrisy reigns. Hypocrisy reigns. And it has to stop. We cannot have a dual-tiered anything. Explaining why it is not a dual-tiered circumstance by then pointing out that it is a dual-tiered circumstance is something that we see as part and parcel of the mainstream media today. No. It's a completely different thing. There are totally different things about these two stories, and that absolves President Biden of all the terrible things we said about President Trump, which is garbage. Pure, simple garbage. So the Corvette Standard is baffling. The statement of no regrets, downright infuriating. And Turley says it's also remarkably moronic with a special counsel investigating those very same things. Turley is right. Either the president believes the special counsel Robert K. Hur will paper over the entire affair, which is not an unreasonable expectation, or he's doing his best to force his hand with a criminal charge. President Biden was miffed to be even asked about the matter. After stonewalling the press for days, he ventured out of the White House bunker to tour storm damage in California, used the victims as a virtual human shield. Quote, you know what, quite frankly, you know what bugs me is that we have a serious problem we're talking about. We're talking about what's going on, and the American people don't quite understand why you don't ask me questions about that. Well, thank you very much for your opinion, President Biden, but when it comes right down to it, the job of the mainstream media is to report to the public of the United States. Now, the mainstream media is obviously on President Biden's side, and they always have been. And if not President Biden's side, certainly the left's side. And so you can put your opinion out there all you want to, but the press is going to ask the questions the press is going to ask because they're the press. The Walter Cronkite standard of that's the way it is exists not just as kind of an egocentric statement on the part of an august news anchor, but also when it comes right down to it, that's simply the reality. The press is the first draft of history. It doesn't have to be right. It doesn't even have to be accurate. It just has to be news, quote unquote news, not what we do here. More about that in a moment. This is the Wells Report. Stay there. I will be right back. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. That's our telephone number. It's right there on the crawl, right down there. Use the number. It's a lot easier for me to talk to you on the telephone since I'm not wearing a suit and tie and are therefore more approachable. I love you, Evie. Anyway, approach. Call me on the telephone. Let's talk. It's a lot easier and it's a lot more clear when you share your opinion on the phone. I'm not going to be mean to you. It's just a lot clearer to have you say your own words as opposed to me paraphrasing them on the chat room, which is also available to you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about that. So we were talking a little bit about President Biden saying that he has no regrets for the way the document scandal, it's not a scandal, but the document issues have been handled. He is someone who is, once again, creating endless migraine headaches for his staff. And some people have talked about, that President Biden is someone who is being ill-handled by his handlers. Gary Olivier, my brother from the Texas State Guard, says the demented old sock puppet Biden has no idea what he's saying. His handlers really need to write him better scripts. Actually, his handlers need to admonish the president until he actually gets it. Those off-the-cuff comments, like the one he made to Peter Doocy of Fox News. Hey, they were in my garage. It was locked, right next to my Corvette. That was off script. So the president needs to be focused on the paper in front of him. Focused on the paper. Follow the checklist, Mr. President. Stop making off-the-cuff remarks. That's the dichotomy I was talking about with regards to Joe Biden, the man. Joe Biden, the president who is being handled by somebody else. And what those somebody else's are doing with his policies. It's a trichotomy, actually. Now, that goes on. They can write all they want for him, the handlers. But when he goes off script or misreads the prompter, he is on his own. And it's got to be a nightmare for his handlers. It does. It absolutely does. The constant cleanup is something that is rife and something that we deal with. But the president makes it worse his own self. Like, for example, we were just talking about the president telling the press corps what they should be asking. And the simple case of the matter is that he goes on to say something like this. He says, as we found a handful of documents that were filed in the wrong place, we immediately turned them over to the archives and the Justice Department. Well, at least they stopped using the word inadvertently placed, because it wasn't inadvertent, because the documents moved several times, and that's not inadvertent. The president said, referring to the National Archives and Records Administration, we're fully cooperating. We're looking forward to getting this resolved quickly. I think you're going to find there's nothing there. I have no regrets. I'm following what the lawyers have told me they want to do, his handlers. It's exactly what we're doing. And then he made this very unfortunate statement. There's no there. Yes, Mr. President, there is. There is there. Telling the media what they should be asking. Saying you have no regrets as to finding these documents and then not announcing them because it was 6 days before the midterm. Then saying imperiously you have no regrets and there's no there. That's a quadraphenic mess that simply has to be better addressed. Not so much by his handlers because they're powerless. He's got to handle it better himself. The question is, can he? Is he capable of it? There's more on this story because there's more to be said on it. If you have something that you would like to say, call us 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. Or you can join us on the chat room if you'd like. Eddie Jones says something the president should have inscribed on an out-of-sight sign in the Oval Office. I don't trust my mouth. You're not the only one, my brother. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. The chat room is flying today. Yvonne writes, they can write all the things they want for him, but when he goes off script, misreads the prompter, he has to be a nightmare for his handlers. We talked about that. Yvonne feel like Kamala, they can't keep good help. Yeah. Then Eddie Jones says this. He says, President Nixon was pushed out for much less, replaced by someone who is not up for the job. Well, now the unelected dude that he's talking about is Gerald Ford, who was appointed by the President Nixon to be the vice president. I understand what he's talking about. He's not talking about the 2020 election or the 2020 election. He's not. But that Nixon was pushed out for much less when you start thinking about the obvious spying that was going on between the FBI, the Democrat National Committee, the White House staff, all of that, all the way to the Oval Office. Yeah, Watergate looks like nothing in comparison, but nobody chased down the Obama administration, the FBI, the DOJ. They're trying, but it's so far been unsuccessful. We'll see if the Republicans can actually do something about that. There's no telling whether they will or whether they won't be able to. Going off script and misreading the prompters, does that remind you of someone else besides Biden? Well, that would be Vice President Kamala Harris. And maybe that's why people are very concerned about, say, for example, asking President Biden to resign. Yvonne says, I suspect Biden is no longer competent to hold office, and perhaps they thought this was a good idea when they got him in there, but they're finding they can't keep him hidden away. And when he's at the mic, no matter how short the speech, he's apt to say something they don't want to hear. Correct. Because at some level, he has the pride of somebody who believes he can do his own thinking, even if he can't. And so that's where we find ourselves in this. And unfortunately, we find ourselves in this because he is the president of the United States. Let's see. Hey, Chris, do me a favor. Chris Grimes just said something. Can you expand your statement a little bit? I'll be more than happy to share it. What do you mean? That would be Donald Trump. What are you talking about? Let's talk a little bit about that. By the way, this is the Lunar New Year. Today is the Lunar New Year. It is the beginning of a lunar calendar and a lunisolar calendar year. The moon cycles are the actual months. This, by the way, is the year of the rabbit. So for those who have the memory that, say, for example, you share with me, the year of the rabbit means that for the first time in 12 years, Elmer Fudd was correct. It is wabbit season. So we can move forward here. So the president is trying to minimize the circumstances of his classified documents. We found a handful of documents. We're fully cooperating. There's no there. Mr. Biden and his advisors, who were first reluctant to release information about the discovery of the documents, faced an onslaught of questions about why the White House kept quiet about the material for so long. They had to protect their position in the midterm elections. Remember, that midterm election had the House and Senate up for grabs. The Republican Party only missed power, at least the power they had, by 1 seat, or flipping the Senate by 2 seats. The information that the president was also guilty of mishandling of classified information by his own admission, they thought that it would have been too close to let that go out, and so they kept it. They kept it under close hold. And since nobody really wants to go digging for information that might embarrass President Biden, well, nobody did any digging. So that's why they're saying now that they were reluctant to discuss the discovery of the documents. By the way, this from the New York Times. Mr. Biden's lawyers discovered the first batch of classified papers on November 2nd, 6 days before the midterms. Later found a second set in a room next to the garage, his library, personal office at home, in December. The existence of the documents became public only last week. Last Thursday, there was a special counsel named Robert K. Hur. The White House tried to draw a clear contrast between Mr. Biden's retention of classified documents and a case surrounding former President Donald Trump. Mr. Trump is under criminal investigation for taking several hundred documents with classified markings from the White House to Mar-a-Lago, his private residence in Palm Beach, and failing to fully comply with the subpoena. That was a subjective point of view from the Attorney General of the United States. The process was ongoing, but the Attorney General saw an opportunity and took it, meaning that the DOJ is fully political, which is always disastrous. Mr. Biden's team appears to have acted swiftly and in accordance with the law upon the discovery of the documents, immediately summoning officials with the National Archives to retrieve the files. The archives then alerted the Justice Department. Officials described the documents found at the Penn Center for Diplomacy, the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy and Global Engagement, the think tank established as Mr. Biden's private office after leaving the vice president, as a small number of documents with classified markings. Some of them the highest classified markings there are. Mr. Biden's remarks closely echo those made earlier in the week by Ian Sams, a spokesperson for the White House, who assured reporters that Mr. Biden was fully cooperating with the investigation. It's important to really understand the distinction here. President Biden is committed to doing responsible things and acting appropriately. His team acted promptly to disclose information to the proper authorities and is cooperating fully. Once again, whether you're cooperating fully or cooperating is a subjective set of terminology that is being looked at by one set of people, say, for example, people who actually paid attention to the news during the time that President Biden was being harangued, and people who are willing to just go with the latest talking point in order to absolve their decision-making at the ballot box as being the right one. And once again, that's not a put-down. That's not a put-down. People voted in good faith for the persons that they thought, the people that they thought would be the best representatives for them. That's fine. I don't have any problem with that. That's called democracy. And if you, by the way, want to change that, then what you have to do is you have to have better policies and you have to have better candidates. Unless, of course, you're Democrats, then you can get anybody elected. That's the way that works. And then getting back to Jonathan Turley. I wrote at the start of the scandal that Biden's silence is hardly surprising, says Judge Turley. Biden has always been better at expressing revulsion than responsibility. Time and again, he has literally rushed before the cameras to denounce others, often without any basis, in fact, for alleged crimes. He's now waited for investigations, let alone trials. When it's come to his own alleged misconduct, Biden will deflect, deny, but very rarely declare responsibility. The comments yesterday were classic Biden. He first deflected by using the California victims, then he denied any real responsibility. Despite the appointment of a special counsel to investigate his conduct, he shrugged off the entire matter as something akin to finding a neighbor's borrowed hammer from 2017 in his garage. We found a handful of documents filed in the wrong place. They should have been in your possession to begin with, sir. If the prevailing idea that former presidents and vice presidents can simply not have any of this material at all. And once again, that gets back to my point. The true scandal here is the difference, the dual tier of law enforcement. It's awful. I think you're going to find there's nothing there. I have no regrets. I'm following what the lawyers told me that they want me to do. The lawyers said, don't ask Mr. President what the documents actually say. That is to protect plausible deniability. That's almost as monstrous as saying I don't have any regrets. Indeed, it's never a good idea to go public with expressions of no regrets when you're being investigated on whether you took classification laws seriously. The statement was right out of the Alec Baldwin School of Criminal Defense and claiming the gun did it. Fortunately, the president is not yet saying the Corvette did it. That's very funny, Mr. Turley, Professor Turley. Since the standard is gross mishandling of classified evidence, the last thing you want to do is convey grossly negligent attitude toward discovery of highly classified material in your various private spaces. The president even added that he's looking forward to getting this resolved quickly. The quick resolution is less likely when you're telling the special counsel that this is no big deal. There's no there. This is precisely the type of attitude that leads to classified materials being stored with a Corvette. It's hard to imagine how President Biden's legal and political team would come up with this as the best approach when the president finally broke his silence. There's a difference between denying and dismissing an alleged crime. As a criminal defense attorney, I would be mortified by a client publicly dismissing the seriousness of the potential crime while he's under investigation. For most defendants, it would constitute bearding the lion, and prosecutors would not take kindly to that approach. Of course, the president could be counting on his prior declaration that no one F's with a Biden. Well, that's not exactly true, is it, Mr. President? However, he may be saying the quiet part out loud and putting her in an early and uncomfortable position. Her is not in an uncomfortable position. He'll simply roll over the top of the president unless he wants to play politics as opposed to doing a real investigation. That remains to be seen. There. It is classified evidence in places like a garage. By stating that it's likely to wrap up quickly, Biden is not only showing little appreciation for the seriousness of the alleged crime, but the seriousness of the entire investigation. He's not only making her look like a stooge or a cipher. He's making Baldwin look like a comparative genius. Yeah, Jonathan Turley. The outrage of all of this is, as I've called the actual idea of these classified documents, is a tempest in a teapot. The circumstances where the president cannot shut up about it or cannot say the most important thing, which is abject and complete honesty about it. I've said several times on this broadcast, hey, this is real simple. Boy, did I make a mistake. After raking President Trump over the coals for irresponsibility, here it comes. Now I know how someone could be that irresponsible. Now I know. This would have all been gone by this time if he'd said that at the outset. The only thing that would have been left over is the actual investigation, which he should say nothing about. Jonathan Turley is completely correct. And the other aspect of this is, okay, so find yourself in a position, Mr. President, where you have done the wrong thing. Come clean about it with the American people. Be done with it and move forward. But in order to do that, you've got to absolve your predecessor. And at this particular moment, for the sake of the nation, and oh, by the way, for the sake of the sensibilities of the American people, what I would suggest is that you just go ahead and do that. So you've got a president and a former vice president making there are significant differences, but making the same mistake. And then what you have here is you have a circumstance where the president has arguable privileges to make that mistake that the vice president doesn't. But what you can do now is you can declare it a zero-sum game, knock off all this garbage, and move forward. Now, do you think that's a viable circumstance? Do you think that's a viable course of action? 817-379-2172. Or did I just say something that is reminiscent of perhaps sweeping things under the rug? I'm not sweeping things under the rug. I'm not. But you can't absolve President Biden without absolving President Trump, and vice versa. The question is, will the politicos say, well, if we flush down President Trump, then we'll have to flush down President Biden, and is that okay insofar as the president has an erosion of his popular support? They're not going to win the 2024 election with Joe Biden. They're just not. They're going to have to find somebody else. I don't know who that would be. But whoever it is going to have a very difficult time winning that election. By the way, Eddie Jones says, strangely enough, this might be why President Obama is so quiet. Yeah, he has nothing to say. Nor does anybody else in the presidium, those people that are running the presidential administration that's currently in power. That's why all this is happening, at least my humble opinion. If you have another one, by all means, share it. By all means, share it. So Gary says, it makes no difference either way, demented old Joe or Cackler Harris. President Biden and his gang of radical communists are running the country. Replace one sock puppet for another. Yeah, except Kamala Harris is worse. She may be in full command of her capacities. President Biden may not be in full command of his. But Kamala Harris is a public liability, which is why she hasn't been saying much. This penchant for trying to cleverly or come up with something that is clever that turns out to be word salad as people are using it. I don't like that term. It's just gobbledygooky and incomprehensible drivel. That's what I like to use. That's the term I like to use. Repeat after me. Gobbledygooky and incomprehensible drivel. See? I knew you could. Yeah, so the circumstance that we have here is, okay, we're in this. It's either a zero-sum game, absolve both presidents, move forward, or flush both presidents down the tubes. Which do you think would be better for the country? But the president needs to get control of his mouth. You should have regrets, Mr. President. You absolutely should. And you should speak them. And you have to stop making loose comments, saying the quiet part out loud, as Jonathan Turley talks about. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. A federal judge in Florida has ordered former President Donald Trump and his attorneys to pay nearly $1 million in sanctions for a lawsuit President Trump filed against Hillary Clinton and many others over claims the 2016 presidential election was rigged. It was a 46-page order. U.S. District Judge Donald Middlebrooks said yesterday President Trump and his lead attorney in the case, Alina Habba, are individually and jointly liable for $937,989.39 in legal sanctions to cover the defendant's attorney's fees and costs. Quote, "This case should have never been brought. Its inadequacy as a legal claim was evident from the start. No reasonable lawyer would have filed it. Intended for a political purpose, none of the counts of the amended complaints stated a cognizable legal claim, unquote. The lawsuit named defendants Clinton and some of her top advisors, as well as former FBI Director James Comey and other FBI officials involved in the investigation into whether President Trump's 2016 presidential campaign had coordinated with Russia to sway the outcome of the election. In September, the lawsuit had been tossed out by Middlebrooks, who called the split a political manifesto. On Thursday, Middlebrooks called the Trump lawsuit completely frivolous. Quote, Mr. Trump is a prolific and sophisticated litigant who is repeatedly using the courts to seek revenge on political adversaries. He is a mastermind of strategic abuse of the judicial process. He cannot be seen as a litigant blindly following the advices of a lawyer, unquote. Middlebrook wrote that claims by Trump and Habba were implausible, specifically noting that Trump's claim that Comey and Clinton conspired to seek his prosecution not only lacks substance, but is categorically absurd. He then went on to say the suit contained, quote, glaring structural deficiencies, and many of the characterizations of events are implausible, unquote. By the way, unfortunately, this has got to be pointed out, that Judge Middlebrooks is indeed a Clinton appointee. That we have a political judiciary is widely known. To say that President Trump is exploiting the judicial system for the sake of his politics completely ignores the fact that when it comes to judge shopping, leftist and rightist lawsuits are part and parcel of the federal judiciary, all intended to create a political outcome. That's why we have judge shopping. That's why we have certain lawsuits filed in certain jurisdictions. And so what's next? I suspect that the Trump legal team will appeal the case. They should, because it's very, very difficult for a lawyer to explain why a federal judge said that no reasonable lawyer would have filed this case. They're going to have to do something about that. And President Trump is, and has been, clearly the victim of an adversarial judicial process up to this point. Most of it is outside the courtroom with regards to Letitia James from New York and other people trying to take shots at President Trump for whatever reason. All of these things have to do with the dismantlement of the left agenda that President Trump was very adept at between 2016 and 2020. And this is the punishment for that. Well, like I said then, after all the political machinations throughout the Trump administration, including the Mueller investigation, including the impeachments and so on, as I said back then, this is exposing more of the seedy underbelly of the swamp than Americans want to actually have anything to do with. They look at it and they're repulsed. They have to be. This is a perverse warpage of some of the very basic columns of American society. And they're all being warped for political reasons. There is something prosaic about this coming back to bite them. That is good. That is good. By the way, Mike Renouy says, it's eerily familiar. That's what Comey said about the DA bringing charges against Hillary Rodham Clinton. No reasonable lawyer would bring this case. So once again, we have this regrettable circumstance where, we've got a political judiciary. Is President Trump being victimized by the judicial process, thus political process again? We don't really know what's in the heart of Judge Middlebrooks. But we can say that there are questions that are being repeatedly turned aside through the judicial process, which I believe gives lie to the entire idea that Middlebrooks is talking about Trump, using the judicial system for vindication or to vindicate himself against his political opponents. Well, apparently there's no problem in vindicating yourself as long as you're vindicating yourself against a Republican. That seems to be the way it looks. Once again, by all means, share whatever disagreeing viewpoint you might have. But we have to have a fair and equitable judicial process. And this is not that. That's the way I see it. How about you? 817-379-2172. No reasonable lawyer would file the case. That's why Trump ended up hiring Alina Habba, an attorney of no acclaim. By the way, today Trump dropped his lawsuit against Attorney General Letitia James of New York. Thanks very much, Chris. Appreciate your point of view. Telephone number 817-379-2172. That puts the wrap on hour number 1 of the Wells Report. We've got 2 others for this Friday, Lunar New Year's Day. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. Alrighty then. See you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point it out, regardless of where that bias lies and regardless of what the facts say. We don't quell facts for the sake of politics. We make commentary. That is my opinion and just as valuable as yours. In other words, by all means, share it. So we debate. So what we have is news, analysis, commentary, and debate. It is the Wells Report. Thank you for joining us. We were talking a little bit about the White House documents mess. I'm kind of eschewing the use of the word scandal because the scandal is the way that it's being handled between President Trump and President Biden. That's the scandal. The mainstream media won't report the reality of that because they're complicit in it. But there are certain things that you can't stop. Truth will out at some point. And this is under the column of it gets worse every second. The Daily Caller is now reporting the following. The White House and Department of Justice worked together to conceal the discovery of President Joe Biden's classified documents for months. Now, is this the New York Post? Is this Fox News reporting this? No. This is the Washington Post. Days after the first trove of documents was discovered at the Penn Biden Center, a senior official in the DOJ wrote a letter to Biden's personal attorney, Bob Bauer, asking for him to cooperate in the inquiry. The official, as I hit the wrong part of the screen, the official also asked Bauer to get the documents but to not look inside, which gives a partial, if convenient, explanation for attorneys without security clearances to look at highly classified material. The official asked Bauer to get the documents, not look inside, and requested for him to disclose where more documents could be located, according to the outlet. More documents were discovered at President Biden's Delaware residence December 20th, January 10th, and January 11th. The White House had initially endeavored to find out how the documents had gotten to the Penn Biden Center and other locations, but on November 10th, the DOJ said it would be taking over the investigation, according to anonymous sources reporting to the Washington Post. Want to stop something right here. So the DOJ officials requested him to disclose where more documents could be located. Those documents were found December 20th, January 10th, and January 11th. Now, remember something. In the President Trump case, there was a special prosecutor named because the president was moving too slowly. He was not cooperating. He was fighting. It was a tug of war, blah, 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 blah. Well, now we're talking about months. The initial discovery was in November. And then now we have documents discovered more than a month later, and then almost a month after that, and the day after that. Would it not be possible to say that President Biden and his lawyers, with the help of the DOJ, according to this article with the Daily Caller, were also involved in the same tug of war, the same mess, the same difficulty? Could it thus be possible that now we're in a situation where we could say that, say, President Biden was not cooperating fully? Remember, that's a subjective term. Is that what we could say? Well, yeah, except there was a subpoena in place for President Trump, and there's not one in President Biden's case. Okay, why not? The unfair glare of the way this is being handled by the powers that be is obvious. It's truly amazing to me. I guess the subset of this information is that honestly, the world moves at the speed of the internet now. It's not about newspapers. You're in a situation where you simply cannot hide from mistruth. It's going to come out. There's too much information available for people to be able to make determinations. In this particular case, the Washington Post has made one. Hardly a conservative, anti-Biden news outlet. So I just wanted to say that. Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco refused to say yes on Wednesday if law enforcement officials told Biden and his administration to stay quiet, according to the outlet. Once again, this is a breaking story. And we're giving it to you from the Daily Caller. Although the documents were originally discovered November 2nd, the news was kept hidden for months and only surfaced after CBS published a report on January 9th. The White House counsel's office refused to tell the Daily Caller when Biden first knew of the documents. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, claimed the press office knew nothing of the documents until the CBS report. That's probably true. In other words, the president blindsided his press secretary. That's what makes the most sense. President Biden downplayed the significance of the classified documents. He did that yesterday. We reported it in the first hour of the Wells report, saying that he has no regrets. Quote, I have no regrets following what the lawyers told me what they want me to do, and that's exactly what we're doing. There's no there. And then goes on to talk about, hey, it's just a handful of documents filed in the wrong place. We immediately turn them over to the archives. If you put them in a box next to a Corvette in a garage, locked or not, those documents are hardly filed anywhere. At the very best, they're in competent storage. And so that's what we have. That is the latest from the Daily Caller. Jeez. It's outrageous. Speaking of outrage and outrageousness, out of Jackson, Michigan today, a Michigan school board member is defending her decision to call whiteness evil on social media, despite facing intense scrutiny in her community. Keisha Hamilton, she is a diversity, equity, and inclusion leader in the Jackson Public Schools and a Jackson Public School Board member, expressed the sentiments on her personal Twitter account in December. Listen to this. Whiteness is so evil, the tweet reads. It manipulates, then says, I won't apologize for my dishonesty and trauma, including practices and thinks or inducing practices, and thinks you should applaud for being honest about its ability to manipulate and be dishonest. Whoa. The tweet has received thousands of views. It drew dozens of parents to a JPS school board meeting yesterday. Additional security measures were implemented for the meeting, and prior to its start, JPS Superintendent Jeff Beal warned attendees to demonstrate civility. During the nearly 2 hours of public comment, speakers were met with a mixture of cheers and anger as accusations of hateful and deeply divisive were directed at Hamilton. Quote, a person with such contempt and hatred for other races has no place in public life and certainly no place on a school board, a parent said, while encouraging the other 6 board members to condemn Hamilton's words. One must be expected to set the highest standards of personal conduct for this community that entrusts its children into its care. Several parents called for Hamilton to be removed from her position. They argued Hamilton is a poor example for JPS students and that she does not have JPS's interests at heart. This is exactly what she wants. This is why she's here. It's not for students, the district, or community, one parent said. It's for her fame and notoriety and the intentional distraction from the great work this district does. Other members of the community took the podium to defend Hamilton's character and integrity. Some credited her DEI background. Nowhere in Keisha's post did it say anything about white people, nor your white mother, nor your white self, nor your white daughter, and not your white son. We're not talking about a person, one community member said. Whiteness is the system, the ideology, the belief, the thought that because your skin is white, you are superior to black people. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? Hamilton, who doubled down on her comments, as most leftists do, during the meeting, echoed those sentiments to the national desk. She emphasized that whiteness is a white radicalized identity which refers to the way that white people, their customs, culture, and beliefs operate as the standard by which all other groups are compared. Hamilton argued there are several recent examples of the normalization of whiteness with the foundation of white supremacy, including the 2020 murder of George Floyd and aspects of the United States criminal system. Quote, these outcomes, actions, and behaviors are not a coincidence, Hamilton told the national desk. There are centuries of data and thousands of articles that repeatedly address these issues. These issues persist by intentional design to maintain whiteness, whose foundation is white supremacy. Hamilton seemingly has the support of the JPS school board, as multiple board members thanked those in the community who defended her on Thursday. They stressed the need for increased focus on equity within JPS, as well as a respect for all opinions and beliefs. TND has reached out to JPS for her comment. The story will be updated if a response is received. So when you start talking about this, you cannot turn away from the realities involved in the juxtaposition of, say, for example, a couple of words and what the outcome of those words with those juxtapositions would be. For some reason, no one is recoiling in horror, or at least the level of horror that I believe these things actually point out, because it's about whiteness. It's about whiteness. It manipulates, then says, I won't apologize for my dishonesty and trauma-inducing practices, and thinks you should applaud it for being honest about its ability to manipulate and be dishonest. What if we juxtaposed a different word in there? What would be the outcome of someone who would say these kinds of words? Let's say, for example, we put the photographic negative on this. That when it comes right down to it, Keisha Hamilton, say, for example, would be white. Or, say, for example, it would be Kevin Henderson, or Hamilton, rather. And let's say we put the photographic negative on this and say this: blackness is so evil. It manipulates and then says, I won't apologize for my dishonesty and trauma-inducing practices, and thinks you should applaud it for being honest about its ability to manipulate and be dishonest. What if that was said by, say, for example, a white person? What would the outcome be? 817-379-2172. Would that person still be on a school board? I don't think so. I don't think so. And let's talk about another juxtaposition. Let's say Ms. Hamilton is herself. Or maybe let's say that Ms. Hamilton is, Kanye West. What would that language look like if she was Kanye West? Kanye West is an excellent example of this. I'll share this with you after the break. You misplaced your juxta. Well, it's obviously in a different position. See what I did there? Juxtaposition. No. Friday in progress. This is the Wells Report. So a member of the Jackson, Michigan School Board talks about how whiteness is so evil. There's a very simple solution for all of this. And I'm going to share it with you. As a matter of fact, that solution is shared by many of the people who listen to this broadcast. And it's something that becomes more and more necessary with every passing fancy of someone who is at least radicalized against white and whiteness as a race. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Mike Renwee points out that today is Bob Barker's birthday, former host of The Price is Right, and someone who I mistakenly thought had passed away, much to my embarrassment. Bob Barker's still with us, 99 years of age. So Bob is still kicking around. And then Yvonne Field says, hey, have you liked and shared this feed? Please do so if you haven't. Speaking of which, by all means, support the report. If you find value in this broadcast, share it with your friends, please. And then if you feel like you'd like to do something else, give us a thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up or a like or whatever your platform allows to say, hey, good stuff. And then, of course, if you want to support the show financially, go to patreon.com/The Wells Report. Patreon, patreon.com/The Wells Report. You can see it on this little crawl down here. It's right there. Yeah. And you can sign up. You can pay us $1 a month. That's pretty good. I mean, the Wells Report is cheap, but it's not free. Actually, it is free. But if you'd like to support it by being a sponsor, just send me $1 a month. That would be very, very nice. Getting back to this article about Keisha Hamilton saying that whiteness is so evil, I said as a thought experiment, what we should do is we should talk a little bit about what if someone had said blackness is so evil. And then I said, well, let's talk about, say, for example, if Keisha Hamilton was, I don't know, Kanye West. What would that statement read that way or that time? Jewishness is so evil. It manipulates, then says, I won't apologize for my dishonesty and trauma-inducing practices, and thinks it should applaud for being honest about its ability to manipulate and be dishonest. We happen to know what would have happened had Ms. Hamilton used, say, for example, Jewishness in place of whiteness, because it happened to Kanye West. He was immediately flushed down the societal tube by many of his sponsors and by most of civilized America. Now, the question is, okay, so is Ms. Hamilton able to get away with this because whiteness actually is so evil? Is the problem in this nation white people? Is that the problem? It seems as though that's exactly what Ms. Hamilton is saying. Now, what's interesting to me at this, in this, is very simple. This is an advertisement for getting your kids out of public schools. Public schools as a brand is being run off the rails by leftists with political agendas, sexual agendas, any number of other agendas that have nothing to do with education of the kids. The people of the United States pay billions upon billions of dollars every single year to support public education. We're not supporting public indoctrination, certainly not of a political kind or a sexual kind or any other kind. We're expecting that the children have a basic education. And that is not what our public schools are doing. It's destroying the brand. It is destroying the institution of public education. Now, I don't have kids in school anymore. But if I had, say, for example, if Colton, my oldest son, was not 24 years old, but rather 4 or 14, he'd be homeschooled immediately. That would be my full-time job. There are all kinds of resources available, all kinds of support structures in place. Many of those people that use those very assets and would represent that support structure listen to this broadcast. Homeschool your kids. The public school system is wandering in the desert under the guise and leadership of leftist radicals. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks for being here today. It's Friday. We get to have a weekend after this. Do you know what I get to do? Yard and housework and laundry. That's what I get to do this weekend. I can hardly wait. I'm sorry, I lost myself there for a moment. Gary Absher writes on the chat room, makes me mad I still have to pay for public babysitting at Fort Worth Independent School District. I have no kids and have more than paid for my public education. Yeah, that's a glaring fault. We'll have to do that. No, Susan is not out of town again. No, that's not why I'm not cleaning up the messes of the boys in the house. No, we have live oak trees. And when they freeze, they dump all their leaves. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And I have to go through and rake them all up, and then other stuff. You know, we separate our housework into a very simple concept. I'm responsible for output. Susan is responsible for input. So what I do is floors and bathrooms and yards and so on and so forth. And she's responsible for, making sure that the grocery shopping is done and all that kind of stuff. So I get to do all my work. I can hardly wait. By the way, Mike Renwee points out the reality that raking is the world's second worst outdoor activity. Mow those leaves into your lawn. It's free fertilizer. Yes, except for one small little problem. You see, Bermuda grass requires a couple of different things every year. One of them is thatching. So when you go ahead and just mow in all those leaves and so on and so forth, free fall, it creates thatch, which you have to remove so that the Bermuda can thus thrive and grow more blades of grass, making your Bermuda grass much thicker. And so that is something I have to. So we've been talking about the malfunctioning public schools, the world's greatest advertisement for homeschooling in the United States. And an argument to stop funding the public schools at the level that they're currently being funded, to touch on Mr. Absher's point. But there's more. A Planned Parenthood sex educator, Mariah Caudillo, shared on TikTok, which is the social media of choice for America's youngsters. That's an old word. That minors can acquire sex toys. In another video, she discusses how to use fruit and vegetables as spicy toys. Planned Parenthood is a leading advocate of comprehensive sex education. They took home over $600 million in taxpayer dollars from reimbursements and grants, according to its 2021 report. The newer sex ed pushed by the abortion rights organization is less grounded in purely clinical facts and includes information on sexual orientation and gender identity. For example, Cadillo believes that comprehensive education should be pleasure-based and include skill building. What skills is she talking about? Quote, comprehensive sex education curricula is mostly written by white folks. There we are again, who have a tendency to do the bare minimum as it relates to acknowledging the intersections of racial justice, social justice, and now reproductive justice, she put on LinkedIn. Now remember, this is a woman who has access to children and makes herself available to children through the auspices of TikTok. Now, normally, under a circumstance whereby, say, for example, Planned Parenthood would be funding itself, I would leave this alone, except, of course, to warn you that this is out there, which is what I'm doing. But that is not what we're doing here. What we're doing is we're now pointing out that Planned Parenthood has received $600 million in taxpayer money. In other words, they are no longer a private institution. They are a public one. With public dollars comes public responsibility. Does this look like public responsibility to you? No, it doesn't. And then she points out, in order to fend off any criticism, that comprehensive sex education curricula is mostly written by white folks who have a tendency to do the bare minimum as it relates to acknowledging the intersections of racial justice, social justice, and the new justice, which is reproductive justice. The cynicism in this is rife. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Remember, Planned Parenthood is the place where the same minor youth can go to for a no questions asked abortion. So indeed, if these people are able to, say, for example, sexualize what is their customer base, then their business goes up, I guess. I guess that's the way you could look at it. If you were, say, for example, objective and fact-based, like the Wells Report. That's thing number one. There's another problem here. I'll get to that presently. She went on to say that pleasure-based sex education can be appropriate for young people. In other words, it's not sex education. It's having sex education. Is that something, again, that is, say, for example, the purvey of a third party involved in the relationship between parents and children? Once again, I'm asking questions. Share your answers. For or against, I don't care. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Can you see redeeming qualities in any of this? Share. Share by all means. You can use the chat room too. Poker Monkey says, my daughter homeschools her kids. She should get a rebate on the taxes she pays for public education. Absolutely. Absolutely. He goes on to say, sexual education is the job of parents and no one else. Also completely correct. Once again, home-based sexual education would be homeschooling, wouldn't it? Reproductive education is fine. I have no problem with any of that. But having sex education, as opposed to whatever sex education is, having sex education is monstrous. Let me get back to the news. This from Fox News, by the way. Everyone deserves pleasure in the way they want to experience pleasure. Reminder, pleasure-based sex education can be tailored to meet the needs of youth you might be working with. In other words, it can be age appropriate. Remember that paragraph. In TikTok videos, Cadillo pretended to use a sex toy on herself. Should that be on TikTok or Pornhub? She discussed her favorite sex toys and showed off her collection of spicy objects. Other videos on sex toys included recommendations on how minors and teens can acquire them. Cadillo also discussed in the video how individuals can hide spicy toys from parents and proceed to provide information on using fruit and vegetables as sex toys. It was unclear whether Cadillo intended for the fruit videos to be for a young audience. I don't know. What are the videos on TikTok? Who are they intended for? The sex educator works for Planned Parenthood Marmonte, the largest affiliate in the U.S., which provides health and education services to more than 220,000 people annually at over 30 locations in mid-California and northern Nevada. Is there a certain age that you have to be to buy a spicy toy? To my knowledge, there's not an actual law that prevents young people from purchasing spicy toys, but typically, adult stores have age restrictions, which prevents young folks from providing or purchasing spicy toys in person. You usually have to be 18 and up to shop at these adult stores, which means that she is talking to people under the age of consent. Under the age of consent. However, it's not illegal to buy spicy toys online, even as a teen, which most people do. You just have to purchase them with a valid credit card, debit card, or gift card. So the best thing to do if you're curious about spicy toys, or if you want to explore what's out there, or if you want to purchase them or one whatever, is to do so online. Do keep in mind that some of these stores also have age restrictions on their website, but like this app, people can access them anyway. Is this not insidious? Or is my perspective somehow damaged because of my whiteness? As part of her position as a digital learning designer, Cadillo appears to work with youth to create sex ed materials. Having sex ed materials. Fox News Digital reached out to Cadillo and Planned Parenthood for comment, but did not immediately receive a response. Before she became involved in sex curriculum, Cadillo worked in middle school classrooms as a Planned Parenthood health educator for 2 years. Middle schools, junior high school children. Going through puberty, you remember that vaguely? Yeah, it was a nightmare. In April of 2021, she said in an interview that some of her social media posts on Instagram were a mirror to what she taught in the classroom. The Sex Ed Files is essentially a folder mirroring the work in the classroom, full of resources, inclusive health, sexual health information, quotes from sexuality professionals and activists, art, and my favorite, anonymous questions from students in sex ed. You know, there's a term called catfishing, where someone goes after a young person for sexual purposes. They throw people in jail for that, unless apparently you're working for Planned Parenthood. Fox News Digital previously reported that an executive director at Planned Parenthood's sex education arm claim that children are born sexual while simultaneously advocating for comprehensive sex education from kindergarten through 12th grade and porn literacy for certain ages. Bill Taverner, who has advocated for sexuality education at the U.S. congressional briefings, is the executive director of Planned Parenthood's Center for Sex Education located in New Jersey. New Jersey, Planned Parenthood Center for Sex Education, New Jersey. Does that seem like a dangerous linkage? The center provides training materials nationally and hosts the largest conference for sex educators in the U.S. In other words, they're putting this out for everyone. Not just kids, but adults. In 2015, he said, "We have in our society an assumption of asexuality with people with intellectual disabilities. It's a myth that's perpetuated. We really are all sexual beings from birth until death." Well, is that used to justify sexual education, having sexual education, having sex education for impaired youth, intellectual disabilities? Is that where we are? Planned Parenthood said the guide entitled "The Fundamentals of Teaching Sexuality," that sexuality is a part of life through all ages and stages. Babies, elders, and everyone can experience sexuality below the age of consent. That is a heinous crime. Is it not? I'm just asking questions here. Around the year 2012, Taverner said children of a certain age should be taught about pornography and sex education, a position he maintained at least up until February of 2021. Taverner appeared to say during that same 2012 interview that some of erotica was useful. Useful to whom? And so, Planned Parenthood, the recipient of $600 million taxpayer dollars, is what? What is it? Are they enemies of the people? Are they trying to sexualize our kids for what purposes exactly? If they're trying to sexualize kids, which they most certainly are, and freely admit it in interviews and so on, why isn't that grooming? Oh my God, he said the G word. That's right. I said grooming. Guess what the latest sin is among people that have, say, for example, a more adult understanding of teaching kids about sexuality? My God, that's a pejorative term. It's horrible. It's terrible. It's disgusting. It's rotten. It's awful. It's the most terrible thing ever. Calling somebody a groomer. Well, if this isn't grooming, what is it? Tell me. 817-379-2172. If it's not grooming, then what is it? 817-379-2172. If you think it's perfectly fine, say so. And I'll listen. I may ask you a couple of questions that may be difficult to answer, but I won't put you down. Mostly. This is the Wells Report, back in 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Stay right where you are. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. Gary says, we were taught sex education as health. We weren't taught how to have sex. Well, Gary, that's changed. Yvonne asks, when you send your kid to a charter school, your money or part of it is sent to that charter school. I would think homeschooling should send some money back to that house. I agree. Absolutely. Mike says, that's all we need, more pregnant children. No, it's not what we need. It's what Planned Parenthood needs. It's outrageous. I guess we just aren't quite depraved enough as a society, says Mike. Yeah. Then Gary points out this very, shall we say, straightforward, if kind of base concept. Spicy toys on your privates, doesn't that burn? Well, I guess that if you have kids, I shouldn't say this. I guess if you have kids at home, you shouldn't buy, say, for example, unprepared jalapenos. Did I say that? Yeah. Yep. The added definitions for groomers and influencers in woke culture. Yeah. If what I'm talking about, this Planned Parenthood sex educator, or more appropriately, how to have sex educator, teaches minors to acquire spicy toys or use vegetables, why isn't that grooming? These same maniacs are talking about, well, we ought to have, what did he say? What did he say about this? I mean, this is horrifying. Let's see. At around 2012, Tavener said that children of a certain age should be taught about pornography and sex education. Really? Why aren't these people groomers? Is groomers now a bad word because, well, let's see, it denotes somebody that because they're Planned Parenthood and because they're august and they're educated and so on and so forth, they can't possibly be grooming kids for sexual activity. No, you're teaching kids how to have sexual activity. How's that not grooming? How is that not grooming? We have in our society an assumption of asexuality of people with intellectual disabilities. Just how bad does this have to get before somebody says, excuse me? And I'm not talking about some conservative, uptight white person, since race was injected into this as an inoculation to keep anybody from arguing about it. I mean, we're going after people with intellectual disabilities. That's what we're doing. This is monstrous. Yeah, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. And we are paying $600 million, apparently, somewhere around that, a year for it. What's the remedy, John David? Glad you asked. Once again, I would probably not be dealing with this except to warn you about it if Planned Parenthood was a private organization. Planned Parenthood needs to immediately return all government taxpayer money to the government. They need to, if they have all the support they claim to have, they need to do exactly what the American Cancer Society, the American Heart, the American Heart Association. They need to fund themselves. They need to do what the United States Olympic Committee does. Fund themselves. Alicia asks, I wonder if parents could be held responsible later, just a thought, if they knew the schools were grooming their children. Actually, I think what you probably mean is, should the schools be held accountable for sexually grooming children? Yeah, I think so. This is not just a situation where you might disagree with the curriculum being taught to your children. This is grooming. We throw people in jail for that. There used to be a law called contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Is that not what Planned Parenthood and all of these, quote, sexual educators are guilty of? Of course they are. They're talking to people under the age of consent. They are sexualizing children going through puberty, if not just trying to convince them that they're the wrong gender and need to have themselves mutilated for the sake of their political agenda. After you're 18, have fun. Fall in love with a sexy jalapeno. You know, bananas are not just for cutting up on Cheerios anymore. but that's after age 18. How did we get there from here? How did we get to where we are now? Here is how we got there. We got there because we didn't stop it when it was just, well, we need to create the Peace Corps. We kept voting for Democrats, not realizing that with leftism comes grooming. We have to be better in the voting booth. That's all there is to it. This is the Wells Report. That's hour number 2. Hour number 3 for Friday's next. All right, my beloveds. God, I need to go shower. I'll talk to you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary that's not news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours, so share it. In other words, we debate. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. It is the Wells Report. You can join us on the chat room. Please do. Man. By the way, in case you're wondering, I was just looking over. Last hour, we were talking about the outrageousness of the left trying to sexualize our children. And it's a complete and utter mess. And you know, if you're not moved by what this leftist intent is to take over parenting of children in the United States, then maybe this might get your attention. This from Fox News came out an hour ago. Many Connecticut parents are not in favor, that's a quote, of their children getting vaccinated without their consent. They are pushing back on a proposed state law for children to make their own decisions about vaccinations at age 12. Quote, I'm not in favor of this bill whatsoever, said mother of three Lori Osenkowski. She's talking to Fox News. I have three sons. My oldest are 12 and 13, and they're called parents for a reason. They look for us as parents to guide them in the right direction, provide safety, whatever they need until they're 18 years old, when they're considered adults. A bill proposed in the Connecticut State Legislature would give children 12 years and older the right to get vaccines without their parents' consent. And who's doing this? You're not going to believe it. Democrat State Representative Kevin Ryan, who represents the state's 139th district, introduced the measure, Bill 5480, which is described as an act allowing children 12 years of age and older to receive a vaccination without the consent of a parent or guardian. The measure, which, by the way, has been referred to the State House Joint Committee on Public Health, was proposed for the state's 2023 legislative session, does not rule out other vaccines aside from those for COVID-19. Ryan's proposal, according to Hartford's WFSB, comes amid concerns from constituents. Parents in Connecticut are required to give either written or verbal permission for their children to receive a COVID-19 vaccine. The age of consent for the vaccine in the state, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, is 18. That, by the way, comports with the vast majority of states saying that the age of consent is 18. This seems wrong to me, said Connecticut Father Todd Pirro. Quote, if this bill would be passed, you are granting the child the right, but you're also taking away a parent's right to be involved in your decision in their health. And that is extremely important. By the way, Fox News is reaching out regarding to State Representative Ryan regarding his vaccine proposal, did not receive an immediate response. It's unclear whether the bill will move forward in the legislative session. Yeah. So, once again, you know, when you vote for Democrats, you're not just voting for, say, for example, somebody that you think would be a good representative. You're voting for an agenda that is decidedly, shall we say, antisocial. The idea of breaking down the family has moved from just saying that the nuclear family is all wrong, despite hundreds of thousands of years of human existence proving the opposite. This is now the state taking over parenting of your children and allowing your children to parent themselves. That is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. This Friday, I have to have a moment to calm down. This is in the news. I double check this stuff. This is where we are. You know, and I said a long time ago, I said, stop voting for Democrats. At least the current batch of Democrats. And people thought, well, there's another right-wing old angry man. Some white guy saying that liberalism is a mental disease. No, it's a difference of opinion. But when you start thinking about what goes with voting for a Democrat, you've got to stop thinking about what this person said on the campaign stump. You have to start thinking about this cabal of what is antisocial legislation that goes with voting for a Democrat. Now, make no mistake. Republicans make ridiculous moves too. The difference that I'm seeing is I can't remember the last time I was reporting on a Republican move to teach our children how to date a zucchini. I just haven't seen that. Maybe if you could say, for example, send me some kind of a link so I could see how Republicans are interested in making a salad into your best friend. Let's see. What opinions do teenagers have if their parents are anti-vaxxers? Well, when they're 18, they can make their own opinion. If their parents are anti-vaxxers, then they are still under the tutelage of their parents. See, I happen to believe, even if I disagree with parental decision-making, that parents, they know more about their families than I do. Apparently, that's not the case in the Democrat Party, Chris. And I'd be very interested if you would give me a call and we could talk about this. I really appreciate your contributions on the chat room, but I'd really like to talk to you about this. 817-379-2172, right there on the little crawl, right there on the little lower third. 817-379-2172. Give me a buzz, Chris. Let's talk this stuff over because you're a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm a constitutional conservative. The Constitution is clear on this. Very clear. Let's see. So they suffer at the ignorance of their parents until they're 18. Couple of things on that, Chris. First of all, are you prepared to say that you know more than, say, for example, the parents of children? Is that what you're prepared to say? Are you prepared to say that society knows better than parents with, say, for example, what might be an unpopular choice? Are you prepared to say that? Are you prepared to say that sometimes parents need to be overruled with the care of their children? These are all simple questions. I've never identified myself as a Democrat. Your statements do. If that's not true, then where are your politics? And if it's not Democrat politics that you identify as, then let's have the conversation anyway. 817-379-2172. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about another article that comes out of New Orleans, Louisiana. That's a place I used to live. The Big Easy. And now it's turned into something else. But that's not what we're discussing here. New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell is currently slamming allegations she's engaged in an extramarital affair, suggesting that those allegations are baseless and the product of sexism. According to NOLA.com, Cantrell allegedly texted one of the news outlet's reporters on Wednesday to push back on what she described as false allegations. Quote, "By the time I complete my tenure as mayor, I would have slept with half of the city of New Orleans." Risky. This is a quote. "By the time I complete my tenure as mayor, I would have slept with half the city of New Orleans based on false accusations that come my way sometimes daily. This is only one of them." In a follow-up text, Cantrell allegedly told the reporter, "If I were a man, you would not be texting me about this bullsh." NOLA and the mayor's office did not immediately return an invitation to Fox News to comment. New Orleans Police Department officer Jeffrey Vappy was removed from Cantrell's security team after an investigation into irregularities in his pay. The investigation found that Vappy's timesheets included long hours clocked on days. I said clocked on days he was not assigned to the mayor's detail or on days when she had not much to do. A new divorce petition filed on behalf of Vappy's wife alleged that he admitted to an adulterous affair with a woman listed in a January 4th filing as Mrs. LC. Multiple news outlets, including WVUE TV and WDSU, have independently verified that the unnamed woman is indeed the mayor. Vappy's wife first filed the divorce papers the day after WVUE ran a segment examining several instances when Cantrell and Vappy allegedly spent hours together in a city-owned apartment. She now says Cantrell played a factor in her marriage's turmoil. The divorce filing lists 10 dates from August and September of 2022 where Vappy and LC engaged in a sexual relationship. Vappy's wife claimed the relationship between her husband and Cantrell started in May and continues to this day. The scandal hitting the mayor comes at a particularly difficult time. Cantrell is facing a recall in New Orleans. Organizers of the recall have slammed Cantrell over record-breaking crime rates, understaffed police and EMS departments, severe government inefficiencies, and allegations of corruption, as well as poor infrastructure, among other things. The recall faces an uphill climb. Just 5 weeks left to collect 20,000 signatures. Political analysts have noted the number needed to initiate a recall is likely even higher, with some signatures destined to be thrown out due to error or creative accounting. Not something that you would expect out of New Orleans, would you? Oh. Yeah, this is not the first scandal to rock a female mayor in the U.S. In 2018, Nashville Mayor Megan Barry eventually resigned after it was revealed that she was having an affair with a police officer, leading her security detail. She pled guilty to a charge about the misuse of overtime hours as she took trips with the officer. All right. So I've said this many times with regards to Bill Clinton and others. And what I want to tell you is this. This is between the police officer and his wife. This is between the mayor of New Orleans and arguably her conscience and her voters. This is being published in Fox News. There are things in these United States that I believe need to be, shall we say, handled in a more mature way. When you're talking about recalling a mayor because of corruption, because of inefficiencies, because of incompetence, and so on and so forth, that, by the way, should be all that was required. Okay? It shouldn't necessarily have to descend to an apparent close relationship with someone in her security detail. More in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. People are human beings. Politics is an inhuman institution. Because of various decisions made by our courts in the United States, one can say anything they choose to or about someone in public life, specifically politicians. It was a Supreme Court decision that I'm referring to, and was it the Sullivan case? Anyway, what it's done is it's created alluring, I dare say, immoral exploitation of privacy in the United States that works to benefit the political process and nothing else. Nothing else. And the simple case of the matter is that this is between the officer and his wife. I believe this is between the mayor of New Orleans and whatever societal relationship she enjoys with her significant other. I don't believe it belongs in the newspapers. I believe that there's a situation where loving between consensual loving between adults in private isn't the business of society. And I believe that all this does is it serves a political end. It serves an end whereby someone can be scandaled out of office, thereby disenfranchising the voters. I don't happen to believe that personal liaisons have anything to do with public policy. I don't believe that whether or not Mayor Cantrell has an illicit affair with somebody is the business of the people, especially in a circumstance whereby her recall should all but be guaranteed by the performance of her in her office as mayor. That city's a mess. That city is an absolute mess. And a lot of it falls on her. A lot of it is just cultural. You know, what I discovered in Louisiana, and certainly New Orleans in specific, is that people find it ridiculous that somebody in public office would not take advantage of whatever privileges, both official and unofficial, are available to those people. Governor Edwin Edwards was chased around by the U.S. attorney, I believe his name was John Vogler, for years, and took him to court several times under criminal charges. And juries would not convict him because of this idea that only an idiot would have high government power and not use it to their own benefit. It's one of the vagaries of life in Louisiana. But while we're on the subject of life in Louisiana, what has that given the people who live in that state, and specifically New Orleans? Well, after years and years of Democrat rule, the school systems in New Orleans are so bad that the prevailing attitude is private school. If you live in New Orleans, you send your kids to private school. That's all there is. No one would even consider sending their kids to public schools. And so when you start thinking about all this, once again, when a republic is formed, one of the harsh lessons learned is that the people who vote for their representatives get the government they deserve, which is why I spend so much time talking about voting better, making better decisions in the voting booth. But sometimes things are best left alone, in my view. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. People ask me, John David, you really love sports. How come you don't do sports talk radio? Well, because I think it's a waste of time. Why do I think sports talk radio is a waste of time? Well, because sports talk radio is fine as long as you're talking about sports. When you're talking about politics, well, that's a little different story. Now, in this particular case, I'm talking about it because I admire LSU gymnast Olivia Dunne. And the reason I admire her will make itself apparent here in a moment. Ms. Dunne, defended her massive social media platform in an interview with the Today Show today. She explained how people perceive her content is not a woman's responsibility. God, I love this. Man, if you don't know who Olivia Dunne is, man, you're going to want to get to know her better because she is 20 years old and she is as clear-eyed about her life and her future as anybody that you will ever discuss or talk with. She has nearly 10 million followers across Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. As a result, she's landed several name, image, and likeness deals she says have earned her at least 7 figures. Wonderful. I'm grateful to be making 7 figures. It's very cool that someone in college has the opportunity to do that now, especially considering the value of college degrees in the real world. Doesn't seem to be too lucrative. Witness the fact that so many hundreds of thousands of American young adults are trying to pay off their college loans. But Dunne has faced a significant amount of criticism over the content, including legendary Stanford women's basketball coach Tara VanDerveer, who told the New York Times in November she sees the trend as a step back for female athletes. What? Dunne has also faced an increased popularity at her meets, which recently prompted LSU to increase security. This is Olivia Dunne talking, quote, there are some people occasionally that do reach, and it is a bit concerning, right? As a woman, you're not responsible for how a man looks at you and objectifies you. That's not a woman's responsibility, unquote. It's brilliant. Absolute brilliant statement. Completely true. Head coach Jay Clark echoed the sentiment, telling the network he doesn't believe what Dunne is doing is setting anyone back. If self-expression and expression and self-expression is something that we value as a right in this country, and we do, then we have to be consistent when it doesn't necessarily fit what our own agenda might be. I don't think it sets anything back. What is wrong with a female college athlete or any college athlete first to get a piece of their name, image, and likeness money that was up until recently collected by the university? What's wrong with that? And what's wrong with being a popular enough influencer on social media to be able to make 7 figures? The only thing that I can say is Coach VanDerveer. Is that her name? Oh, let me go back. Yes, VanDerveer. It seems that Tara VanDerveer, is very upset about the possibility that Ms. Dunne can essentially be independent of the university she attends. As far as I know, isn't that the point of a university? Isn't it a point of at least some level of independence based on what the students are there to do, which is not so much to learn new things as much as to learn how to deal with the things you've already learned? The colleges and universities, the best ones, teach you how to think and teach you how to discern and teach you how to do things that apparently that are at odds with liberal society. Quote, liberal society. Actually, liberal society, the term liberalism, has been hijacked as some sort of term of art for leftists. Those are completely different. I don't know what Coach VanDerveer is talking about. But Jay Clark, who was the coach of the LSU women's gymnastic team, has got it exactly right. This doesn't set anybody back. What this does is this provides Olivia Dunn with comfort and a start in life that I hope turns into a multi-million dollar, if not billion-dollar enterprise. Go, girl, go. And if she is able to set an example for other young women who are college athletes or not, I say go for it. There was a ruckus at LSU's first meet of the season against Utah. The university implemented certain safety measures, including having a security guard present. In the past, I've had some of my supporters come out to the meets and watch and cheer for LSU, but that was insane. It really was. They gave us some new rules for us athletes just to keep us safe, not to go into the stands after the meets. And we have a security person that travels with us. Good. Clark said the university had already been discussing an increase in security in large part due to social media. Quote, I think it creates a false sense of accessibility and familiarity that followers feel as though they have some sort of personal connection to the athletes. That's something you have to deal with. That is something that you have to deal with. Here's what I think. What I think is the college athletes, yes, should indeed be given a college education for their athletic prowess. But I also believe that they should have a reasonable access to the money generated by the university based on their name, image, and likeness. Now, is that a situation where, in a perfect world, that money would be paid upon graduation, which is something that I proposed when all this came up a couple of years ago? Well, differing people can disagree. But all I can tell you is that I happen to believe, to my core, by the way, I happen to believe that indeed, when it comes right down to it, these kids are adults. She's over 21. She can make her own decisions. She's over 18. She can make her own decisions. As a matter of fact, colleges that forbid that level of independence, I believe, only prolong adolescence. And they start making dumb decisions. There would be very well, at least sexual assaults on college campuses around the nation would be reduced to the level of sexual assaults in general society if indeed the university called the cops and stood back and let things fall where they may. Well, but these are just kids at the beginning of their life and blah, 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 blah. Well, yeah, maybe the first class that a college freshman should take is mind your manners and keep your hands to yourself. Don't drink yourself into oblivion. Don't do silly things like, I don't know, if you're female, go hang around in a frat house. Maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe if, say, for example, there was some level of responsibility for everyone's behavior, certainly societal responsibility. If there was some sort of expectation that you comport yourself like an adult, these university students would treat themselves and others like adults. Am I missing something here? I don't believe so. I just don't believe so. Yeah, I happen to think that that what you have here is you have someone who has a clear eye about not just herself as an LSU athlete, but someone who actually knows what she wants out of life and knows how to handle it and is doing very well. And to have some sour female basketball coach showing up and saying, my God, I think that's disgusting. Why do you think it's disgusting? Because she made over 7 figures? Because she's independent of, say, for example, the university system? Or that she, say, for example, has other pursuits that don't necessarily keep her locked down under an imperious coach? These are all things that have to be discovered. All have to be, shall we say, investigated. At least in the privacy of, say, for example, someone's conscience. This gal's amazing. I can hardly wait to see what she does next. I can hardly wait to look forward to be standing on the finish line, applauding for Olivia Dunne to run by. Because this one's got it. This one's got it. And I happen to believe that as for setting female athletics back, how? How does it set female athletics back to have an independent woman making money? That's ridiculous. On its face. Crying out loud, coach. Chill out. You know, maybe that special semester at the Bobby Knight School of the Care and Feeding of College Athletes was not necessarily as good an idea as you thought it was. I looked at that today and I went, okay, so she's a millionaire. She's beautiful. She's an LSU gymnast. She understands that it's not her responsibility to have something to do with how somebody would objectify her. Yeah, as a woman, you're not responsible for how a man looks at you and objectifies you. That's not a woman's responsibility. Brilliant statement. Absolutely brilliant. I'm glad she's got extra security. I'm reasonably sure that as a gymnast, she probably possesses the physical skill to be able to defend herself at some level. I do. Although, if I were her father, I would make absolutely sure she knows how to run a 38 special. Absolutely. This is your friend, Ms. Olivia. Here, let me show you how to load it. Let me show you how to fire it safely. Let me tell you what the rules are. Yes, Mike says, or run like hell. Well, I've discussed that too. There are rules, John David's rules of combat. Run before you stun before you maim before you kill. It's a use of force continuum. But it starts with run. It does. Being responsible in society is something these people should learn. Part of that responsibility is protecting themselves. Part of that responsibility is learning how to make $1 million when you're 20 years old. What are you doing? And you're standing in the way of that. Why? I just don't think that's anywhere close to right. As a matter of fact, I think it's absolutely ridiculous and silly. And that's why I wanted to say something like that on this broadcast. But while we're on the subject of trying to, keep women down, let's talk a little bit about the latest stylings of the Chinese Communist Party, shall we? This is good. The Chinese Communist Party is launching a round of digital cleanup this month for online content in the country. The government is now beginning to clear the internet from vulgar materials that promote bad culture. Yeah. According to the Chinese government, the crackdowns are intended to curtail the spread of bad culture, protect the rights and benefits of online users, clean up the online ecology, and create a positive, civilized, and healthy climate in public opinion. And what they're doing is targeting the indecent appearance of sexualized women, both on their own and as models for products and locations. How Taliban of them. Images of women who are too scantily dressed, too suggestively posed, or overly sexualized will be removed from websites accessible inside China. And I know what you're thinking. Those ridiculous communist cretins. Those censoring jerks. Just exactly what the heck is going on? Hey, Chris, you're not blocked. Chris, you still there? You're not blocked. I didn't block you. Christopher. I'm sorry. This is a chat room guy. Chris, you're not blocked. Chris, you're not blocked. Hello? No, I would, no. Anyway, so you're sitting there saying, gosh, these Chinese communists how Taliban of them, they're ridiculous. It's absolutely awful. Wasn't the United States government doing the same thing to censor public debate about things not Democrat? I mean, are we at that level? Maybe not the level of this. I mean, all these women are wearing bikinis, although one's doing a really cool pole dance move. It's pole dance practice, actually. I mean, what's wrong with that? I mean, we've been talking about gymnastics. One person's balance beam is you're listening to the Wells Report. Back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I was just a kid when my dad got me an RCA portable record player. It was really cool. It was like a little suitcase. And it actually sounded very, very good. And as a part of that Christmas gift, my sister got one too. As a part of that Christmas gift, I got several albums. And some of those albums have stuck with me ever since I must have been like 10. Okay. And they've stuck with me because one of them was James Gang Rides Again with Joe Walsh. It is a work of art. Another one was Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, Four-Way Street. It was their third album. It was also their first live album. It was released as Atlantic Records SD-2-902. It shipped as a gold record, and it peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 200 of albums. A document of their tour from the previous year, the live recordings presented were taken from shows at the Fillmore East in New York City on June 2nd through the 7th, the Forum in Los Angeles, California, and the Auditorium Theater in Chicago. At the time the album was recorded, tensions between the band members were high, with their dressing room fights becoming the stuff of rock legend, even being referenced by Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention in their 1971 LP Fillmore East, June 1971. The tensions led to Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young dissolving. Shortly after the recording of Four-Way Street, they would reconvene for a stadium tour in the summer of 1974. The next release of new studio material by the group would not be until CSN in 1977 without Neil Young. It's a great album. It taught me the magic of live albums in general. It was beautifully recorded. It was very good. David Crosby, who led the name of the band, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, has passed. Remember, I was telling you about Jeff Beck, for example. We lost Jeff Beck, and we lost the drummer of Bachman Turner Overdrive. And I said that we'd be losing more of these guys and women. And unfortunately, I was right. David Crosby's wife, Jan Dance, announced that Crosby died after a long illness in a statement reported by Variety yesterday. A source close to Crosby confirmed the news to Rolling Stone. Thank you at the David Crosby, singer-songwriter Melissa Etheridge tweeted, along with a photo of herself with Crosby as he played guitar. I will miss you, my friend. In another tweet, Etheridge thanked Crosby for giving her the gift of family. 2 of Etheridge's 4 children, Bailey and Beckett, were conceived with cooperative donations from Crosby. Just goes to show you how important a Dixie cup can be. Shouldn't have said that. Etheridge was not the only celebrity paying tribute on social media. I'm grieving the loss of my friend and Bailey's biological father, David. He gave me the gift of family. I will forever be grateful for him, Django and Jan. His music and legacy will inspire generations to come. He was a true treasure, and he was. I didn't necessarily agree with everything that he said or did, like, for example, one of the last statements. Heaven is overrated. David, I hope you found out otherwise in your transition. I sincerely hope you found out otherwise. I don't know what to say other than I'm heartbroken to hear about David Crosby, wrote Beach Boys co-founder Brian Wilson. David was an unbelievable talent, such a great singer and songwriter, a wonderful person. I'm just at a loss for words. Love and mercy to David's family and friends. Roseanne Cash, I can't begin to say how influential Crosby, Stills, and Nash were for me. I'm grateful David Crosby lived, and so very sad he's gone. Singer-songwriter Jason Isbell, with whom Crosby performed live in recent years, posted on Instagram, "We love David, and we'll miss that miracle of a sound he made." To the family of @the David Crosby, my condolences, thoughts, and prayers go out to you, tweeted Brett Michaels. We lost an icon and a legend. It's been a very sobering few weeks with the loss of so many people. It puts real emphasis on live your life to the fullest. As much as I loved his music and I loved his thoughts on Twitter as well, rest in peace, David Crosby, tweeted Sebastian Bach, lead singer of Skid Row. Thank you for the lifetime of inspiration. Matthew Caws, the lead singer of Nada Surf, tweeted, "Thank you, David Crosby, for your enormous part in the music that has enriched my life so much. Playing it loud right now." Maria Shriver described Crosby as an end of an era. Christina Applegate encouraged her followers to join in blasting Crosby, Stills, and Nash music in his honor tonight at 7 p.m. Pacific time. My friends and neighbors will howl and then blast Crosby, Stills, and Nash to honor this beautiful soul and legend. I played an awful lot of drums to 408 Street, dreaming about what it would have been like to sit on that stage with that great music. And yes, while you may have disagreed with David Crosby, you can't disagree that he made a brilliant contribution to the musical arts of these United States. R.I.P. David. God bless you. See you Monday. Well, alrighty then. I certainly hope you enjoyed the radio broadcast, except it's not really a radio broadcast, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Okay, just a song before I go. Yeah. God bless all y'all. If Chris Grimes is still here, Chris, I didn't block you. I wouldn't block you unless you were trolling and being disrespectful. That's all there is. A team comes on at 5. Huh? What? I don't understand none. All right, I got to go. For those people who are looking at this wondering, does he lose his mind after the show? Well, yeah, of course. All right, I got to go. Take good care, and I will see you on Monday.